What if I told you that Prince Harry just turned the royal world upside down in a single sentence? That with one declaration, he ripped open centuries of tradition, sent palace aides scrambling, and left the British public asking if the monarchy itself might finally break? Harry didn't whisper it. He didn't hint at it. He announced it with clarity, with fire in his voice, with the kind of conviction that only a man who feels cornered and underestimated could summon. He said, "My wife deserves the crown they tried to keep from her." Let that sink in. Not deserves respect. Not deserves acknowledgement. He said Meghan Markle deserves the crown. And he wasn't talking about some symbolic gesture. He was talking about the real thing. The title, the power, the throne. Picture the scene. Cameras flashing, reporters scribbling, the world waiting for the typical, tame, polished statement that usually comes from a royal mouth. Instead, Harry detonates a bomb. He declares that he will fight, formally, legally, publicly, for Meghan Markle to be recognized as a future queen consort, even though she has no direct lineage, no royal birth, no centuries-old pedigree behind her. Can you imagine the silence that followed? Or maybe it wasn't silence. Maybe it was the audible gasp of history itself being challenged. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because here's the truth. In the United Kingdom, the line of succession is sacred. It's carved in stone, protected by law, reinforced by centuries of repetition and ritual. You don't just stand up and say you want to change it. You don't just declare that your spouse, who the establishment fought tooth and nail to keep at arm's length, should leapfrog into the most powerful title in the monarchy. But Harry did. And in doing so, he didn't just defend Meghan. He waged war on the very system he was born into. Now ask yourself, what drives a man to do that? Is it love? Is it desperation? Is it revenge? Or is it all three, fused into one reckless act of defiance? Harry's announcement was not just about Meghan. It was about himself, about his role as the so-called spare, about the pain of being overlooked, overshadowed, silenced. For years, he's been told who he is, what he can and cannot do, how far his voice is allowed to reach. And now, he's seizing the one thing they can't ignore, the crown itself. Let's step back for a moment. Think about how the monarchy has always portrayed Meghan. A disruptive outsider. A Hollywood actress who didn't play by the rules. A woman who threatened tradition with her American ways, her independence, her refusal to bow her head. They painted her as divisive, manipulative, unworthy of the royal title she already has. And now, in a twist no one saw coming, Harry is demanding she be given the ultimate royal honor. If that's not irony, I don't know what is. This is why the story matters right now. The monarchy is fragile, more fragile than it's been in decades. King Charles is aging. Prince William is preparing for the crown, but his popularity is already under pressure. Scandals have rocked the family, from Prince Andrew's disgrace to constant criticism of their wealth, their privilege, their relevance in a modern world. And just when the palace needed calm, Harry ignited a firestorm. His announcement forces a new question onto the global stage. Is the monarchy truly unshakable, or can love, ambition, and rebellion actually bend its laws? And let's not ignore the timing. Harry and Meghan know exactly how to play the media game. They know when to speak, when to stay silent, when to drop a headline so explosive that it ricochets across the world before breakfast. Why now? Why this exact moment? Some insiders whisper it's because Harry sees the monarchy at a breaking point and believes it can be forced to change. Others say it's pure vengeance, a calculated move to claw back dignity from Meghan after years of humiliation. And maybe, just maybe, it's both. But let's be clear, this isn't just about a headline. This is about history. If Harry somehow succeeded, if laws were challenged, rewritten, or bent, then Meghan Markle would be on a path no outsider has ever walked before. She wouldn't just be a duchess. She wouldn't just be a royal exile. She would be a queen. The very thought of it terrifies some and electrifies others. Can you imagine Buckingham Palace draped in American-style celebration, Meghan crowned alongside Harry in defiance of centuries of bloodline rules? To some, it's a nightmare. To others, it's poetic justice. So what happens next? Already, royal insiders are panicking. Aides are briefing journalists anonymously. Words like chaos, betrayal, and unprecedented are flying through the press. The palace is scrambling to prepare a response. But how do you respond to a demand that strikes at the very foundation of the monarchy? Do they dismiss it, risking Harry coming back louder? Do they punish him, risking public sympathy for Meghan? Or do they ignore it, hoping it fades, when we all know it won't? And the public? Oh, the public is divided. Some Brits are furious. Queen Meghan? Never, they shout. Others are intrigued. Maybe it's time the monarchy modernized, they whisper. Across the Atlantic, Americans are eating it up. To them, Meghan as queen feels like the ultimate Hollywood ending. Can you hear the irony? A woman who once played supporting roles on screen is now being pitched as the leading role of the monarchy itself. It's almost too wild to be true. Almost. But let's not forget the deeper layer. Behind the politics, behind the tradition, behind the public drama, there is a marriage. A man standing up for his wife. Harry's words, "My wife deserves the crown they tried to keep from her," are as much about love as they are about power. They are a statement of devotion, a shield raised against a world that has mocked, rejected, and tried to erase Meghan. Some will say it's romantic. Others will say it's foolish. What do you say? Is this the ultimate act of love, or the ultimate act of self-destruction? As the cameras flashed and the headlines spread, one thing became clear. Nothing in the royal family will ever be the same again. Harry has forced a conversation the palace never wanted to have. He has put Meghan's name in the same breath as Queen, and once that word is out there, it cannot be taken back. The monarchy thrives on control, on predictability, on scripted appearances and rehearsed speeches. Harry just shattered the script, and now the royals are scrambling to rewrite it. But here's the question that will haunt them all. Can they even stop him? Harry may not have the legal authority to rewrite succession laws, but he has something just as powerful, the attention of the world. In the court of public opinion, he can rally voices, spark debates, make people question traditions that once seemed untouchable. And once people start questioning, change is no longer impossible. Can you feel that? The ground shifting under Buckingham Palace? Still, for every supporter Harry gains, he makes another enemy. King Charles, blindsided. Prince William, furious. Palace aides, terrified. The media, sharpening their knives. And yet Harry stands, declaring that Meghan deserves the crown. It's the kind of fight that could either rewrite history or destroy him completely. There is no middle ground. And that's where we leave the introduction. Harry's bombshell has been dropped. Meghan's name is now tied to the crown. The palace is in chaos. The public is divided. And Harry has just crossed a line he can never uncross. But what comes next will push this drama to a level no one, royal or commoner, ever imagined. Because if you thought the announcement was shocking, wait until you see the ripple effects it set off inside the royal family itself. The storm has only just begun. Harry's shocking statement goes public. It wasn't whispered in hushed corridors. It wasn't an anonymous leak slipped to the tabloids. It was Prince Harry himself, face forward, voice steady, eyes filled with a fire the palace hadn't seen since the days of his mother, that dropped the thunderbolt. He stood there, not as the timid spare everyone had dismissed for decades, but as a man with a mission. He declared, clearly, defiantly, "My wife deserves the crown they tried to keep from her." Can you imagine the immediate electricity in the room? The flashbulbs from cameras bursting like fireworks. Reporters frozen in disbelief, pens pausing mid-scribble, jaws half open. It wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration of war. Not against a foreign enemy, not against gossip or rumor, but against the very system that had raised him, confined him, and tried to silence him. The monarchy itself. The middle of the press conference turned into a frenzy. Headlines were being drafted in real time. Harry demands crown from Meghan. Duke declares war on succession laws. Royal outcast wants Meghan as queen. Editors fought to outdo one another, knowing that this wasn't just a royal soundbite. It was history unfolding before their eyes. You could almost feel the blood draining from the faces of palace aides watching from afar. Every word Harry spoke was another nail hammered into the coffin of royal secrecy. And Meghan, standing there beside him, what did her eyes reveal? A mix of pride, fear, and the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. She knew, just as he did, that once this genie was out of the bottle, there would be no putting it back. Do you think she wanted him to say it? Or do you think even she was stunned that Harry had gone so far, so fast, with no turning back? This was not the same Harry who once bowed his head and quietly followed orders. This was not the soldier who saluted without question. This was the Harry who had walked through fire, who had lost his mother to a system of image over humanity, who had watched Meghan nearly break under the crushing weight of scrutiny. This was a Harry who no longer cared about protocol, and he made that clear with every syllable. But here's where the story deepens. Harry didn't just declare his love. He framed it as justice. He didn't say, "I want Meghan to be queen because I love her." No, he said Meghan deserves the crown. Deserves. As if it was owed to her, stolen from her, denied to her not because of her merit, but because of her background, her race, her nationality, her independence. It was more than romantic, it was revolutionary. The press conference unraveled like a storm. One question after another shouted at Harry. "Prince Harry, do you mean to challenge the laws of succession? Are you saying Meghan should be crowned even if you never become king? Do you expect King Charles and Prince William to support this demand?" And how did Harry respond? Not with hesitation, not with the usual evasive answers royals are trained to give, but with sharp clarity. He said, "The monarchy must modernize. The people deserve a crown that represents them. Meghan is the embodiment of that future. I will fight for it." Fight. That word echoed louder than anything else. He wasn't just suggesting. He wasn't just proposing. He was threatening to fight. The entire world heard it. Did you hear it too? The undertone wasn't just about tradition. It was about battle lines being drawn. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, chaos. Phones ringing off the hook. Aides rushing down hallways, whispering furiously into each other's ears. Reports say even King Charles himself was caught off guard, watching a replay of the footage with his jaw clenched tight, muttering to his advisors, "He's gone too far this time." Too far. Or exactly far enough. Because if you think about it, hasn't Harry always been painted as the reckless one, the impulsive prince who makes decisions before thinking them through? But what if this wasn't reckless at all? What if this was the most calculated move of his life? By saying it out loud, on record, in front of the cameras, he forced the monarchy into a corner. They can't deny it. They can't bury it. They can't spin it as a rumor. It's there, in high definition, for the world to see. The public reaction came fast and furious. Social media erupted. Hashtags like hashtag Queen Meghan and hashtag Royal Rebellion began trending worldwide within minutes. Some voices were supportive. It's about time the monarchy adapted. Meghan would make a wonderful queen. Others were vicious. "Over my dead body will Meghan Markle ever be our queen?" The divide was sharp, and Harry knew it would be. He knew he'd ignite fury. He wanted to. Because, at the core, this wasn't just about Meghan. This was Harry's rebellion against being the spare. The one who never mattered. The one who was always in William's shadow. For once, Harry was commanding the world's attention. Not as a footnote, not as a sidekick, but as a man making history. Was this his way of stepping out of the shadows forever? And Meghan, whether she wanted this fight or not, was now at the center of it. Think about that. Every word Harry said painted her as the future queen. Every headline now ties her to the crown. The palace can try to erase it, but it's already etched into public consciousness. And isn't that how revolutions start? Not with laws, but with ideas. Not with votes, but with voices. Still, even as supporters rallied, enemies sharpened their knives. Behind closed doors, insiders whispered about stripping Harry and Meghan of every last privilege they still clung to. Titles, properties, protection, gone. Could the monarchy dare do it? Could they risk making Harry and Meghan into martyrs, fueling their narrative even further? Harry knew that too. That's why he chose his moment carefully. Too big to silence. Too public to punish without backlash. Too explosive to fade away. And that's what made his declaration so dangerous, so defiant, so unforgettable. But here's the part no one saw coming. Harry wasn't finished. His statement wasn't the peak. It was just the opening shot. He had more to say, more to reveal, more to threaten. The press thought they'd heard the headline. They hadn't. The palace thought they knew what Harry was capable of. They didn't. Because what came out of his mouth next would escalate this battle to a level that even his fiercest critics never thought possible. And it left the monarchy wondering. Had Harry just started a fight that could end with the crown itself crumbling? Meghan's path to royalty, from Hollywood to crown ambitions. She was never supposed to be here. Meghan Markle was supposed to be a Hollywood story, not a Windsor one. She was supposed to be the actress who found moderate success on a legal drama, not the woman who ended up challenging centuries of monarchy with the weight of a crown hanging over her name. And yet, here she is, the Duchess of Sussex, the woman at the center of the storm. And now, thanks to Harry's Thunderbolt declaration, she's being spoken of as the possible future Queen of England. But how does someone go from Los Angeles to London? From red carpets to royal banquets? From playing a paralegal on TV to being pitched as the next queen consort? The answer lies in a journey that is as unlikely as it is polarizing. A journey filled with ambition, resilience, love, betrayal, and the kind of twists that sound more like a Netflix series than real life. Let's start at the beginning. Meghan Markle was born into a world far removed from crowns and castles. She was biracial in an industry that still struggled to embrace diversity. She was ambitious, fiercely independent, determined to make her own way. From day one, Meghan carried herself like someone who knew she was destined for more. But destined for royalty? Who could have imagined it? Did you, even for a second, see this coming back then? Hollywood shaped her. The glitz, the auditions, the long waits, the constant rejections. She fought her way into roles, refusing to fade into the background. And whether you love Meghan or loathe her, you can't deny the audacity of that claim. Imagine the irony. The woman once accused of being too ambitious for the royal family is now being defended as deserving the very title she was said to be unfit for. Meghan as queen consort. Does that image sit well with you? Or does it make your blood boil? Because one thing's for certain, it doesn't leave anyone neutral. But let's go deeper. Meghan's background wasn't just Hollywood glitz. It was humanitarian work, speeches on gender equality, advocacy for women's rights, traveling across the world to support causes she believed in. Even before she met Harry, Meghan had the resume of someone who wanted to make an impact. Isn't it fascinating that the same qualities that made her appealing to the public are the ones the monarchy feared the most? A voice, independence, influence. And so, when Harry stood on that stage and declared she deserves the crown, he wasn't just talking about love. He was drawing a line through history. He was pointing at Meghan's life, her resilience, her activism, her ambition, and saying, this is the future of monarchy. This is what it must become. But let's not pretend the path ahead is easy. Royal insiders scoff at the idea. They whisper that Meghan has never played by the rules, that she doesn't understand tradition, that she craves the spotlight too much. They say a queen consort must be dutiful, loyal, quiet when needed. Do you think Meghan fits that mold? Or do you think Harry is trying to create a new mold entirely? And yet, supporters rally around her story. To them, Meghan isn't the threat, she's the opportunity. The chance for the monarchy to reflect the modern world. A biracial American woman on the throne? To some, it's unthinkable. To others, it's exactly what Britain needs. Do you see the divide? Do you feel the tension? But here's the twist. While Meghan's journey from Hollywood to royalty may feel complete, Harry's announcement reopens it entirely. It suggests that her path isn't done, that the Duchess may yet rise higher. Higher than even her harshest critics ever imagined. Can you picture it? Buckingham Palace balcony, Meghan crowned, waving to the public as queen? Some recoil at the image. Others cling to it with hope. Either way, Harry has made sure we can't ignore it. And Meghan herself, how does she feel? Behind closed doors, insiders say she was both touched and terrified. Touched by Harry's devotion, terrified by the storm it unleashed. Because while the idea of Meghan as queen electrifies, it also endangers. It paints a target on her back bigger than ever before. Is Harry protecting her, or putting her in the line of fire? This is where her path takes a dangerous turn. Hollywood taught her how to perform. Royal life taught her how to endure. But now she must learn how to survive a battle that could decide the monarchy's future. She is no longer the outsider actress. She is no longer just the Duchess. Thanks to Harry's words, she is the contender. And that's why this chapter ends not with resolution, but with uncertainty. Meghan's path to royalty is no longer about where she came from. It's about where she might be headed. And the question lingers in the air. Will she be remembered as the actress who married a prince, or the woman who could have been queen? Because the next twist in this story isn't about Meghan's past. It's about the monarchy's future. And that's where the real battle begins. Royal succession laws, a battle centuries in the making. Centuries of bloodlines. Centuries of rules. Centuries of carefully protected succession charts written in ink so permanent that even time itself seemed afraid to smudge them. That is what Prince Harry has just gone to war with. By demanding that Meghan be recognized as a future queen consort, Harry is not simply challenging his father or his brother. He is challenging history. And history, as the monarchy has always known, doesn't bend easily. Let's ask the obvious question. Who gets to be king or queen in Britain? The answer has always been simple: blood. Lineage. A direct, unbroken chain connecting the crown of today to the crowns of the past. Every monarch, every heir, every spare can trace their right back through centuries of marriages, births, and coronations. That's why the royal family clings so tightly to genealogy. It isn't just tradition, it's legitimacy. Without that line, the entire house of cards collapses. But now Harry has cracked the foundation. He isn't asking for Meghan to be respected as his wife. He isn't even asking for her to be celebrated as a duchess. He's demanding she be acknowledged as someone who could sit on the throne. Do you see how seismic that is? Because if Meghan can be placed in the line of queenship without royal birth, without ancient lineage, then the entire structure of succession is up for debate. And if it can be debated, it can be changed. Let's rewind. The rules of succession have always been brutal. Centuries ago, only males could inherit the throne. Women were excluded unless absolutely necessary. Daughters were ignored in favor of younger sons. It wasn't until very recently, in 2013, that the law was updated to allow the eldest child, regardless of gender, to inherit. Think about that. Less than a decade ago, Britain still believed a younger son outranked an older daughter. That's how entrenched the system is. So if such a deep-rooted law could be changed in our lifetime, why not others? Why not the idea that only royals by birth can ascend? Why not the idea that love, marriage, and public will can rewrite history? Harry's argument, whether you agree with it or not, forces us to ask the unthinkable. Should monarchy be based on bloodline, or on something else entirely? Now, imagine the fury inside Buckingham Palace as Harry's words hit the airwaves. King Charles knows better than anyone that the line of succession is not up for casual debate. Charles waited 70 years to become king. 70 years of knowing exactly where he stood in that line. William has known since birth that the crown will be his. For Harry to stand up and suggest that the line can bend for Meghan, it's not just rebellion. It's heresy. But here's where it gets even more dangerous for the monarchy. Harry isn't entirely wrong. There is precedent for shifting rules when the crown feels pressured. Parliament, after all, technically has the power to change succession laws. That's how the 2013 reform came about. It's also how Catholic heirs were once banned, and later allowed, to marry into the line without being excluded. Laws that were once unthinkable to touch have been altered when the world demanded it. So ask yourself, could Harry ignite enough public debate to pressure lawmakers again? The palace hopes the answer is no. They hope that the British people will laugh off his demand, call it absurd, and move on. But what if they don't? What if younger generations, already skeptical of the monarchy, see Harry's claim as a rallying cry? What if they say, yes, why not Meghan? Why not rewrite the monarchy to reflect the modern world? You see the danger? Once you open the door, you can't control who walks through it. And the irony is brutal. The same laws that once protected the monarchy's exclusivity may now expose its weakness. Because if bloodline is everything, then Meghan will never be queen. But if Harry convinces the world that bloodline is outdated, the monarchy loses its strongest argument for existing. Either way, the institution bleeds. But let's not ignore the human side of this. Harry grew up memorizing those succession charts. He knew from the time he could walk that he would never be king. He was the spare, always second, always expendable. Is it any wonder that now, as a grown man, he wants to challenge the very laws that made him feel irrelevant? Isn't it poetic that he is demanding those laws be rewritten not for himself, but for the woman he loves? Still, it's not just Harry's personal rebellion. It's a declaration of war on centuries of monarchy. Because if Meghan's claim is entertained, it means anyone could, in theory, be elevated. It means tradition isn't permanent. It means the monarchy is just another system that can be reshaped. And if that happens, why keep it at all? Think about the tension this creates for William. As heir, his entire life depends on those rules never changing. His children's future crowns depend on those rules staying sacred. For Harry to challenge them is not just a betrayal of family. It's a direct threat to William's destiny. No wonder insiders say William's response was pure fury. But we'll get to that later. For now, the focus is on the laws themselves. Unyielding, centuries old, designed to be untouchable. Yet here comes Harry, throwing them into the public square like cards on a table, daring the world to pick them apart. Can you feel the tremor in history? Can you sense the crown's unease? Because here's the cliffhanger no one expected. Insiders whisper that Harry's team has already consulted constitutional experts. They've asked questions. They've explored options. They've looked for cracks in the system. And according to one source, they may have found a loophole, one so shocking that even seasoned royal watchers were left reeling. But what loophole could possibly exist in a system this rigid? And what would it mean if Harry actually tried to use it? That is where the Real story begins. The crown versus modernity, Harry's argument for change. The monarchy must modernize. Those were Harry's words. Simple, direct, explosive. For centuries, the crown has thrived on its ability to stay the same while the world changed around it. The robes, the rituals, the rules, it all whispered permanence. But Harry isn't whispering. He's shouting that permanence is a prison. He's saying the monarchy must adapt, or die. And his proof? Meghan Markle. Think about it. The monarchy is the world's most famous living museum. Everything about it, the coronations, the processions, the titles, exists to remind the public that the crown is unchanging, eternal, sacred. But here's the irony. History shows us the monarchy has changed over and over again. Absolute monarchy became constitutional monarchy. Kings lost power to parliament. Succession laws shifted in 2013 to allow daughters to inherit before sons. And every time, those changes came not because royals wanted them, but because the public demanded them. So is Harry just the latest voice pushing the crown toward another inevitable change? Harry's argument is brutal in its simplicity. The monarchy must reflect the people it serves. And Meghan, as he sees it, is the perfect symbol of that reflection. Biracial, American, independent, a woman who came from outside the royal bubble and brought with her the experience of being treated as other. She is, to Harry, the embodiment of modernization, proof that the monarchy could shed its centuries-old elitism and embrace diversity, equality, and representation. But does the monarchy even want that? Or does it fear that once it modernizes too much, it ceases to be monarchy at all? Let's ask the hard question. When you think of the monarchy, do you think of modernity or of tradition? Most people picture crowns, castles, horse-drawn carriages. They picture stiff uniforms and ancient rituals. They don't picture California sunshine and Hollywood glam. They don't picture podcasts and documentaries. They don't picture Meghan Markle. And that's exactly the point. Harry is daring the world to picture it, to imagine a monarchy that looks less like the past and more like the present. But let's not pretend this argument comes without risks. For every person who sees Meghan as a modernizing force, another sees her as the monarchy's destruction. Unfit, critics say. Too controversial. Too divisive. They argue that modernization doesn't mean bending to outsiders. It means carefully evolving within the family line. They say the monarchy can update its image, but it can't hand the crown to someone who wasn't born into it. That, they claim, would be betrayal. And isn't betrayal the most dangerous word in a family built on loyalty? Still, Harry refuses to let go. To him, modernization isn't optional, it's survival. He's seen the monarchy's relevance erode. He's seen public opinion sour, especially among younger generations. He knows that for many, the crown feels outdated, out of touch, and unnecessary. His message is clear: adapt or be swept aside. And his proof? Meghan. He points to her humanitarian work, her advocacy for women and minorities, her ability to connect with global audiences, and he says, "This is what the monarchy could be." But here's the twist. Modernization requires sacrifice, and the monarchy has never been good at sacrificing its own power. Think back to Princess Diana. She wanted the crown to show humanity, vulnerability, modern compassion. The institution fought her at every turn. She was adored by the people, rejected by the system. Now, decades later, Harry is fighting the same war. Only this time, he's fighting for Meghan. Does that sound like history repeating itself to you? And let's not forget the irony of Harry's own position. He is part of the very system he's attacking. He is both insider and outsider, prince and rebel. That duality gives him credibility and makes him dangerous. Because when Harry says the monarchy must modernize, people listen. They know he's not some commentator. He's lived it. He's seen the rot from inside. And when he says Meghan represents the future, it forces the question. Is the monarchy's future tied to rejecting her or embracing her? The British establishment is terrified of that question. Imagine what modernization on Harry's terms would mean. A monarchy that breaks with its obsession over bloodline. A monarchy that crowns an American woman of color. A monarchy that admits tradition is not eternal. That image may thrill some, but to the old guard, it's nothing short of revolution. And yet, isn't revolution what the monarchy secretly needs? Without it, younger generations drift further away. Without it, the crown risks becoming nothing more than a tourist attraction. Without it, the relevance Harry talks about disappears completely. Meghan, for all her controversy, represents the one thing the monarchy cannot manufacture: change that feels real. Still, the more Harry pushes, the more enemies he makes. King Charles sees modernization as gradual, controlled, safe. William sees it as his own destiny to manage, not Harry's to dictate. The courtiers and aides see it as chaos, threatening centuries of structure. And for every word Harry says about modernization, they dig their heels in deeper. Isn't it ironic? The harder he pushes for change, the harder they push to keep him out. But here's the real danger. Harry isn't playing by their rules anymore. He doesn't need palace approval. He doesn't need royal courtiers to draft his speeches. He has the microphone, the camera, and the global audience. And in the age of social media, the court of public opinion can sometimes outweigh the court of law. Can the monarchy afford to ignore him? Or does ignoring him only prove his point, that they're stuck in the past, incapable of adapting? This is why Harry's declaration hits harder than any scandal before. It's not just about Meghan. It's about the soul of the monarchy itself. Will it cling to tradition until it withers? Or will it risk survival by modernizing in ways it never dreamed of? Harry is forcing that question, and Meghan is the living, breathing test case. But here's the cliffhanger. Insiders say that while the palace was still reeling from Harry's announcement, King Charles himself delivered a private reaction so furious, so intense, that even senior aides whispered they'd never seen him like this before. They say Charles felt blindsided, betrayed, and ready to strike back in a way that could escalate this feud to dangerous new levels. So what exactly did King Charles do behind closed doors after Harry's declaration? And how far would a father go to silence his son when the crown itself is on the line? King Charles blindsided, his silent rage. The footage was still playing on the television inside Buckingham Palace when King Charles reportedly froze, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked carved from stone. Harry's voice echoed from the screen. "My wife deserves the crown they tried to keep from her." The words hung in the room like poison smoke. Advisors and aides shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the king's reaction. And when it came, it wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was silence. You see, Charles has always been a man of measured temper. He spent a lifetime swallowing frustration, bowing to duty, waiting in the shadows for a throne that seemed to take forever to come. But in that silence, insiders say, lay a rage so cold, so calculated, it terrified even his closest confidants. Because this wasn't just his son embarrassing the family again. This was his son directly undermining the monarchy, the very institution Charles has sacrificed his entire life to protect. Imagine it, 70 years of waiting, of preparation, of shaping himself into a king finally realized. And now, just months into his reign, his younger son detonates a bomb under the throne itself. What father could bear it? What monarch could tolerate it? One palace aide whispered, The king said nothing, but the look in his eyes was enough to send chills down the room. He didn't need words. We all knew what he was thinking. But what was he thinking? Rage at the betrayal? Fear that Harry had lit a fuse that could not be extinguished? Or perhaps something more painful? The sting of realizing that history might remember him not as the monarch who modernized the crown, but as the father whose son tore it apart. Insiders described Charles pacing slowly, his hands behind his back, his shoulders rigid. He reportedly muttered, almost to himself, "He's gone too far this time." Too far. The same phrase he used when Diana first outshone him in the public eye. The same phrase he whispered when Harry and Meghan gave that Oprah interview, hurling accusations at the family. Too far has always been Charles's breaking point. But what happens when even too far isn't enough to stop Harry? Now consider Charles's position. On one hand, he is a father, watching his son burn bridges with gasoline-soaked matches. On the other, he is a king, sworn to defend the monarchy's stability above all else. Which role wins? Does the father forgive? Or does the king punish? Can Charles even afford to be a father anymore? Or is his crown too heavy for that kind of mercy? Aides scrambled for solutions. Some urged the king to issue a swift public statement condemning Harry's remarks, reasserting the sanctity of the succession laws. Others begged him to say nothing, to avoid giving Harry's demand even more oxygen. And Charles, true to his nature, chose restraint, at least in public. But behind closed doors, restraint gave way to cold fury. One report suggests Charles immediately summoned senior advisors for an emergency meeting. The topic? Containing Harry. Containing. Not reasoning with. Not reconciling. Containing. The king allegedly asked, "What powers does the crown have left to strip Harry and Meghan of their remaining privileges? Could they be silenced financially? Could their titles finally be revoked? Could the institution cut them off completely?" Imagine the desperation of a father asking how to disarm his own son. But Charles knows there's a danger in acting too harshly. Strip Harry of everything, and you make him a martyr. Punish Meghan, and you confirm every accusation she's ever made about the monarchy's cruelty. Ignore them, and you risk the perception that the crown is weak, afraid to confront its own rebels. Every option is a trap, and Charles, a man who has waited decades to prove himself as king, now finds his reign defined not by his own actions, but by Harry's rebellion. And here's the cruelest twist of all. Charles has always feared being overshadowed. First by Diana, then by William, the popular heir, and now, even in his own reign, by Harry, the son who walked away. Imagine the sting of knowing your crown is tarnished not by enemies abroad, but by the family within your own bloodline. Do you think Charles regrets not acting sooner? Do you think he wonders whether driving Harry and Meghan out only gave them more power, more freedom to attack from outside the palace walls? Because that's the irony. In cutting them loose, Charles may have created the very monster he fears now. Insiders whisper that Charles's rage was not only at Harry, but at himself. Rage that he let the situation spiral. Rage that he underestimated his son. Rage that his crown, the one thing he waited longer for than any monarch in history, might now be remembered for scandal, not stability. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. While the public saw Charles remain silent, calm, and composed behind palace doors, discussions began about a line no monarch has crossed in modern times, severing ties so permanently that Harry and Meghan would be erased from the royal landscape entirely. Erased. Imagine that, your own flesh and blood, wiped out of the institution's official story like ghosts. And let's not forget Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Sources suggest she was present during William's outburst, watching him pace, fists clenched, jaw tight. Catherine, who has always been the peacemaker, reportedly urged him to stay calm, to think of their children's future, to remember that the crown must endure above all else. But William wasn't in the mood for calm. His children, George, Charlotte, and Louis are the future of the monarchy. Harry's words, in William's mind, were a direct attack on their destiny. And that made this fight personal in a way nothing else could. So here's the question. Is William's fury driven by duty or by fear? Fear that Harry's rebellion might actually resonate with the public. Fear that Meghan's story, outsider, fighter, underdog, might appeal to younger generations more than William's polished, dutiful image. Because deep down, William knows the monarchy survives only with public support. And Harry, with one explosive sentence, has forced the public to imagine a monarchy that doesn't include William at the top. That thought alone is enough to make the air tremble with rage. But the real danger lies in William's next move. If Charles represents caution, William represents confrontation. And insiders whisper that he's preparing to confront Harry directly, not just through legal maneuvers or public statements, but in private words that could ignite the deepest, ugliest family feud the crown has ever seen. Because when William finally speaks to his brother about this demand, it won't be as heir to the throne. It will be as a man whose patience has run out, whose blood is boiling, and whose promise to defend the crown outweighs any bond of brotherhood. And when that confrontation happens, one thing is certain. The fallout will not stay behind closed doors. It will spill into the press, into the public, into history itself. But before William can even make his move, something else is happening outside palace walls. A reaction so immediate, so visceral, it shocks even the royals into silence. Because while Charles and William rage behind the scenes, the people, the very public the monarchy claims to serve, are making their voices heard. And those voices are not united. The UK public reacts, disbelief, fury, and support. The moment Harry's words hit the airwaves, the public response was instantaneous. Phones buzzed, televisions blared, social media exploded. "My wife deserves the crown they try to keep from her." The phrase spread like wildfire, plastered across headlines, retweeted thousands of times per minute, dissected on every talk show. Britain hadn't heard a line this provocative from a royal since Diana declared, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." And just like then, the nation split in two. Let's start with the disbelief. For many, Harry's declaration was simply unthinkable. Queen Meghan? Never. Callers screamed into live radio shows. Morning news programs cut to stunned faces of presenters, some laughing awkwardly as if Harry's words were a joke. Others shook their heads in disbelief, muttering phrases like, "He's lost the plot." To them, Harry had crossed from rebel prince to dangerous fantasist, demanding something that not only defied tradition but insulted it. But not everyone dismissed him. In pubs and living rooms across the UK, the conversation was louder, rawer, more divided. Why shouldn't Meghan be queen? Some asked. If the monarchy is supposed to represent the people, why can't it represent all the people, including someone like her? These weren't whispers. They were bold statements from citizens who had long been questioning the monarchy's relevance. For them, Harry's words weren't madness. They were inspiration. And then came the fury. For many loyalists, this was betrayal on a scale they could barely stomach. Union Jacks flew in defiance as die-hard monarchists gathered outside Buckingham Palace, waving signs that read, "Protect the Crown," and "No Queen Meghan." Phone lines at major tabloids lit up with furious readers demanding harsher coverage of Harry and Meghan, calling them traitors and grifters. To this group, Harry wasn't just rebelling. He was spitting in the face of every soldier, every taxpayer, every loyal Briton who still believed in the sanctity of the crown. The tabloids, of course, had a field day. Headlines screamed from every front page. Royal outrage. Harry demands crown for Meghan. Treason or true love. Palace in chaos as Duke declares war on succession. Every paper, every broadcast, every website ran with it. The story wasn't just national, it was global. Meghan Markle, once again, was the face dominating every screen. But let's pause for a moment. Because beneath the noise, the protests, and the applause, there was something deeper. The public reaction revealed something the palace has long feared. Britain is divided, and the monarchy is no longer untouchable. Younger voices online mocked the outrage of traditionalists. Memes comparing Meghan to Diana spread with captions like, "The Queen we deserve." Hashtags like #ModernMonarchy and #Queen Meghan trended alongside #AbolishTheMonarchy. It wasn't just about Meghan. It was about whether the monarchy itself should still exist. One commentator on a late-night panel said it best: Harry may not get Meghan a crown, but he's put the monarchy on trial in the court of public opinion. And the jury is split. Do you see the brilliance of that? Harry didn't need Parliament. He didn't need the Archbishop. He needed the people. And whether they booed him or cheered him, they were talking. Loudly, passionately, obsessively. That, in itself, was a victory. Let's talk numbers. Polls conducted in the days after Harry's announcement showed exactly how divided the country had become. Around 65% of older Britons rejected the idea outright, calling it ludicrous. But among younger voters, those under 35, the number dropped dramatically, with nearly 40% saying they'd support the monarchy modernizing to allow Meghan a formal role at the top. 40%. For a centuries-old institution built on bloodline exclusivity, that number is terrifying. It's not majority support, but it's enough to show the ground is shifting, and the streets echoed the numbers. Outside Parliament, protesters chanted, "Modern crown for a modern world." Others jeered, shouting, "Send them back to Hollywood." London, once the steady heart of monarchy, had become a battleground of opinion, and the royals, watching from their palaces, knew the tide of public sentiment could not be ignored. But let's not overlook the quieter reactions. Families around dinner tables debated. Friends argued in group chats. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Harry had forced the conversation out of the palace and into the people's hands. And once that happens, the monarchy loses control. Do you think that terrifies them? Still, support for Harry and Meghan wasn't universal, even among critics of the monarchy. Some argued Harry was only making things worse. "If you want reform, you don't burn the house down," one commentator quipped. Others accused Meghan of manipulating Harry, of planting the idea for her own gain. Old accusations resurfaced: social climber, opportunist, Hollywood diva. The more Harry pushed her into the spotlight, the more his critics sharpened their knives. And yet, even among skeptics, there was one undeniable truth. Meghan had become impossible to erase. The idea of her as queen may horrify many, but it has now been spoken, debated, and imagined. That image will never fully disappear. Isn't that how revolutions start? With an idea too powerful to kill, no matter how many sneers or insults are thrown at it. And here's the cliffhanger. While Britain erupted in fury and disbelief, across the Atlantic, a very different reaction was taking shape. Americans weren't just watching. They were celebrating. They were cheering. They were calling Meghan something she had never been called in Britain: America's queen. So what happens when the country Harry left behind mocks him, but the country Meghan came from crowns her with adoration? That's the next chapter of this storm. America weighs in, Meghan as America's queen. If Britain erupted in outrage, disbelief, and division, the reaction across the Atlantic was almost the opposite. In the United States, Harry's declaration landed not as scandal, but as spectacle. Americans don't see the monarchy the way the British do. To many, it's not sacred. It's entertainment, it's celebrity, it's a soap opera with crowns and castles. So when Harry stood up and said, "My wife deserves the crown they tried to keep from her," American ears didn't hear treason. They heard romance. They heard defiance. They heard a Hollywood ending being written in real time. Let's set the stage. Within minutes of Harry's announcement, American morning shows like Good Morning America and Today were running with the story. Meghan's face, smiling, confident, framed by headlines like "Fight for the Crown" and "Harry's Bold Move," dominated TV screens across the country. Panelists laughed, debated, teased, and speculated. And almost all of them called Meghan one thing: America's queen. Think about the irony. In Britain, she's painted as a usurper. In America, she's crowned with admiration. To the American public, Meghan is not just a duchess. She's a symbol. A biracial woman who came from outside the royal bubble, who endured criticism and racism from the British press, who walked away with her dignity intact. To Americans, she's not a threat, she's a triumph. And Harry's demand that she be recognized as a future queen only fueled that narrative. Social media in the US went wild. Hashtags like #AmericasQueen and #CrownMeghan trended for hours. Fans posted side-by-side photos of Meghan and historical queens, captions reading, "The Queen Britain doesn't deserve, but America does." Memes mocked the outrage in Britain. Images of Meghan photoshopped on dollar bills, under the words, "Our Queen Forever." Can you see the contrast? Across the ocean, the monarchy was in chaos. In America, Meghan was being celebrated as a pop culture icon. But it wasn't just fans. American celebrities jumped into the conversation too. Talk show hosts joked that the U.S. had already rejected monarchy in 1776, but if Meghan ever wanted to wear a crown, they'd make an exception. Influential voices praised her resilience. Activists highlighted her as a role model for women of color. The message was clear. Meghan may not be Britain's queen, but she had already been crowned in the hearts of many Americans. And here's where it gets strategic. Meghan and Harry's power base has always been stronger in America than in Britain. Their Netflix deals, their podcasts, their speaking engagements, all of it thrives in the U.S. marketplace. And with Harry's new declaration, that base only grew stronger. In fact, insiders whisper that American producers and publicists were thrilled by Harry's words. Why? Because controversy sells. A prince fighting for his wife against the establishment? That's a story Americans will buy tickets for, stream shows about, devour books on. In Hollywood terms, Harry just gave Meghan the greatest role of her life. But here's the tension. While Americans cheered, the palace seethed. Can you imagine the fury inside Buckingham as they watched U.S. commentators call Meghan queen material? To the royals, that wasn't just cultural difference. It was humiliation. They were losing control of the narrative overseas. The very country they had once colonized was now mocking them, cheering on the woman they had tried to sideline. Isn't that a historical irony too sharp to ignore? And let's not pretend this doesn't have ripple effects. America's admiration matters. It amplifies Meghan's global influence, gives her platforms, raises her profile. It also creates pressure on the monarchy. When global headlines frame Meghan as America's queen, how long before British citizens start asking uncomfortable questions? How long before the narrative shifts from ridicule to possibility? Remember, perception is power, and Meghan's perception outside the UK has never been stronger. Still, support in America isn't universal. Critics in the States argue Harry's announcement proves the couple's obsession with titles and status. Conservative commentators mocked him as the prince who ran away but still wants the crown. Others accused Meghan of orchestrating the entire move, playing the long game to climb higher than anyone thought possible. From Hollywood actress to Queen of England, they sneered. It's the ultimate social climbing plot twist. But even their criticism kept the spotlight on her, which, in media terms, is still a win. And here's the cliffhanger. While America embraced Meghan as their unofficial queen, British insiders began leaking stories to the press. Stories painting Meghan not as a victim, but as a schemer. Whispers of secret ambitions, private conversations, even alleged evidence that she had been planning this from the start. So the question becomes, is Meghan truly the modern queen Harry believes she is? Or is she the master strategist her critics claim? Because what came next was not celebration, it was attack. And the knives were aimed directly at Meghan. Meghan's critics strike back, unfit for the crown. If America was ready to crown Meghan with adoration, Britain was sharpening its daggers. The louder Harry declared his wife's right to the throne, the louder the whispers grew within royal and media circles. Meghan Markle is unfit to be queen. It started as murmurs, anonymous palace aides feeding reporters snippets of disdain. She doesn't understand tradition. She's too ambitious. She would destroy the crown. Within hours, those whispers had become headlines splashed across the front pages of Britain's most notorious tabloids. And the message was clear. Meghan wasn't just wrong for the crown, she was dangerous. Think about the irony. Meghan had been accused of being too modern, too outspoken, too unwilling to bow her head. Yet those same qualities were exactly why Harry framed her as the monarchy's future. To her critics, this wasn't modernity, it was chaos. A queen, they argued, must embody dignity, duty, restraint. Meghan, in their words, embodied drama, division, self-promotion. Do you agree with them, or do you see something else? Let's take a look at the tactics her critics used. They didn't just argue against Harry's demand. They resurrected every scandal, every rumor, every accusation ever thrown at Meghan. Old stories about alleged staff resignations, claims of bullying behind palace walls, tabloid-fueled tales of diva behavior on set during her acting career. Even her estrangement from her own family was dragged back into the spotlight. To her critics, these were not isolated stories. They were evidence. Proof, they said, that Meghan could never, ever sit on a throne. And yet, wasn't Diana called difficult too? Wasn't she accused of being too emotional, too disruptive, too unwilling to play the obedient royal wife? History has a strange way of repeating itself, doesn't it? Only this time, Diana's son is fighting for the very woman who has inherited that same outsider label. But the attacks didn't stop at character assassination. Critics began attacking Harry himself, framing him as blinded by love, manipulated by Meghan, reckless in his desperation. He's not fighting for her crown, one anonymous source told the paper. He's fighting to validate his own insecurities. The implication was cruel but calculated. Harry wasn't a devoted husband. He was a fool. And Meghan was the puppeteer. Isn't that the oldest accusation ever thrown at powerful women? That they couldn't possibly stand on their own merit, but only through manipulation of men? And yet, the narrative stuck, because it was familiar, and familiarity breeds belief. The royal establishment knows how to protect itself, and this time, it mobilized fast. Senior royal commentators were rolled out across television networks, solemnly reminding the public of the sacred duty of the crown. Experts lectured viewers on the importance of bloodline. They insisted that if Meghan's path to the throne was even entertained, the monarchy itself would crumble. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly their fear, that Meghan could ignite something they couldn't control. And the public? Divided once again. Loyalists nodded along, relieved to hear their outrage validated. But younger audiences pushed back. Why is Meghan always the villain? One viral tweet asked. Why is she always attacked when she refuses to shrink herself? Every attack only seemed to deepen the divide, fueling the very conversation the monarchy wanted to silence. Still, the attacks escalated. One British tabloid claimed to have obtained a leaked letter from within Meghan's circle, an alleged note outlining her long-term ambitions that hinted at aspirations far beyond the role of Duchess. Was the letter real? Or was it palace spin? We may never know. But the damage was done. Suddenly, every headline screamed the same message. Meghan had always wanted the crown. Harry hadn't been defending her. He had been playing into her plan. Do you see the brilliance of this strategy? By painting Meghan as power-hungry, her critics made Harry's declaration look less like love and more like manipulation, less like devotion and more like delusion. If the public believed Meghan had been scheming all along, then Harry's fight for her became less noble and more tragic. But here's the catch. For every attack, Meghan had defenders, allies in America, supporters online. Women who saw in her story not ambition, but resilience. They fear her because she's powerful, one commentator said. They call her unfit because she refuses to be silent. And that's the paradox Meghan's critics couldn't escape. The more they tried to tear her down, the more some rallied to lift her up. Still, inside Buckingham Palace, the knives weren't just metaphorical. Insiders whispered that the Archbishop of Canterbury himself was preparing to weigh in, not with a political judgment, but with a spiritual one. And if Meghan's critics could enlist the church, it would deliver the ultimate blow. Because the monarchy may bend under public opinion, but it bows to the authority of faith. And what the Archbishop had to say next could make or break Harry's fight.